See, this is weird for me to attempt, to do presentations just on virtual. I mean, I did it during COVID, but I like presenting to people in person.
Yeah, I know.
You're talking to people.
Yeah.
In fact, I give a lecture on presentations. I always tell my students, I say, dry runs are hard. They're awkward, because you're talking to people that have heard it before and all this. I said, the good news is this: when you're talking to people, it's always easier. It's always easier because you're looking at people.
That's right. They have that. That's what poetry. That's true. Yeah. Hi, can everybody hear us?
We'll give them a little bit of a grace period.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm sorry we're not feeding you. I got voted down.
It's kind of a brown bag, but
Stacy actually was going to have some food. I said, no, but I don't know how many people are going to be virtual. Does anybody want to drink?
may I have a water, please?
Water.
Thank you.
Ice, Diet Coke. Victoria, you good?
Well, yeah.
Well, I know you're good, but are you thirsty?
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I am a little parched.
I was going to get you a drink.
Thank you.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Joanne. I knew you were going to be here, Joanne.
Hey, how's it going?
Yep, you bet. Thanks for doing this.
Okay. Ryan, you look sharp in that photo. Man. So before we get Paul, do it, but remember my whole goal of this thing is to get you interested in the book. You just can't go through a whole book in 45 minutes.
Vegas on Saturday.
Yep.
Crazy. Wow. And even when we were coming back, it was quite a bit, but I think it was already like in Nevada.
Hi, Carlos. Robert Shank is here. He's in the house. Robert, how's Purdue doing right now in basketball? Are they undefeated? You're muted, Robert. Did anybody watch the SDSU game? Robert, if you watched the SDSU game, which you probably didn't, they underplayed, and then they literally made not a half-court shot, but a shot about 10 feet behind half-court to put it into overtime.
Oh, wow.
We were getting beat the whole game. Because we haven't played in a while, we ended up losing in double overtime, which I got to tell you, I'm disappointed, but I'll tell you this right now. Credit to Troy and credit to our guys too. I mean, they haven't played in a while. They've been at the longest off than any team in basketball right now. They're like a week and a half. So, you can get it going whenever you want, Paul. Whenever you.
All right, everybody. Can you hear me? Sounds like we can. So
Yes.
Good to have you filtering in today for today's event. Hi, I'm Paul Goebel. I'm the chairman of the Education Committee in San Diego, and we present several institutes per year. We aim for a monthly schedule when we can find a topic worthy of an institute, and we're always looking for various subjects and presentations. And one of our one of our series of presentations that we've had in years past is a leadership reading series, and they're presented by Jim Haughey, Director of Engineering in San Diego. So this we've had these presentations by Jim for many years, and then the last couple of years we've not had them as part of the education committee. So we're happy to have that again and continuing. And today Jim is going to be talking about Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So I think this is an important leadership book, and when I heard about this, it prompted me to read it. I thought it was really interesting reading, but I think Jim's going to have a different take on it. So I will turn this over to Jim in a couple of seconds, and I'll remind everybody that we're going to be recording this session for future use. And the recording it's already going. So thank you for being with us today, and I'll hand it off to Jim Haughey.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so this is a reboot of the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Okay, I did this about 15 years ago, and then we had it on a book club about 7 or 8 years ago. I remember because Robert Soriano was in that session when we did that. I usually will give out books. I have 10 books here. My goal here isn't necessarily to go through the entire book. That's almost impossible to ever go through a book. My goal here is actually to get you interested enough to want to read the book. And if I pull that off, you can pull a free book right here. And as Paul stated, we had a leadership book summary series. It goes from either Covey's 7 Habits to Getting to Yes to Bring Your Whole Self to Work. And I can show you later at the library those. If any of you want me to reboot one of those, it's easier for me to reboot than it is to redo or to make one up. So that's my goal, is to just get you interested enough in this book. And as Paul stated, the books that I've mentioned are pretty iconic. They're very well-known book. This one has sold, I have no idea, hundreds of millions of copies probably. And I was actually introduced by this book, and this is what I love about these types of things. I was given this book from Christy Daly. Do you know Christy? DPR. DPR had an industry event, and I usually try to pull everything back, and they gave me a book. In fact, this is the book they gave me. Those that are in person. That's why I like people that are in person. But I wrote it in there. I since have let her know that how much I appreciated it. And anyway, so that's how I got this book, was introduced. And when I got this book, I fell in love with Patrick Lencioni and his books. Here's just a sample of his books right here. They're all good, I'd say. I wouldn't say they're all great. They're all good. Some are better than others. Many of these I've given away in time. For instance, Steve Ragg made fun of a meeting because my agenda was long, even though the meeting was still, I always was on time in the meeting. So I got him Death by Meeting, which is a good book. Getting Naked is about being vulnerable, and we'll talk about that here. Silos, that taught me a lot. Or there's Silos, Politics. Those are his books. And then that 5 Temptations of CEO, gave that one to Brian Lutz years ago. I think last year I gave The Motive to Scott Davis. The motive was basically, as you become a leader, is it because you want to be a leader, or is it because you really want to serve people? And that was the whole thing about the motive. Now, Patrick Lencioni is really interesting because all of these books, half of them are a fable. They're easy to read. Half of them are a story, and he's a good storyteller. Everything in there is fictional. He comes up with names, locations. And when you read the fable, that's amazing. He's just a good writer. I mean, it's like you're there. And then the other half of the book is the leadership or business lesson. That's his model for every one of the books that I've read. Okay. So that's Patrick Lencioni. In a small world thing, and this is a total small world thing, is that 15 years ago, I was introduced to him. About 3 years ago, one of my best friends I've known since literally we were both 2 years old, said, Patrick Lencioni, I know Patrick Lencioni. Our kids going to go to the same high school right now. Up in a Bay Area, there's a Bay Area Catholic high school up there. Becky Bate, yeah, her kids all went through, so she knows Patrick well. Of course, she hasn't read any of his books, I don't think, but that was a weird small. He's from the Bay Area, so All right, so this is what we're going to go through, the 5 dysfunctions of the team. Okay, so we are not going to go through the fable at all. And quite frankly, as I was telling Paul earlier, the best way to learn something is to teach it. I had to reteach myself some of this stuff because it was a long time ago that I read this book. And I don't even remember the fable, to be honest. So I'm not covering any of that. But this is what I'm going to cover. I'm going to go over an overview of the 5 dysfunctions. Then we'll go over the evidence, some solutions, and then the test. What's the test? That's why I got glasses on right there. You'll notice there's a little bit of a theme in here. When you see red text, it's bad. Green text is good. So that's why the word dysfunction is always red through here. And you'll see the solutions, okay? Okay, so the 5 dysfunctions. I'll go through one by one, but right now I'll just say that they're all foundational. They're hierarchical in the sense of trust. If you have an absence of trust, you would definitely have a fear of conflict. And if you have fear of conflict, you're going to have no commitment. And if you don't have commitment, you're not going to have any accountability. And if you don't have accountability, you're not going to have any results that you want. So, and then when we go through the solutions, we'll work down. Okay. Okay, so one by one, we're going to go through them one by one, and then we'll go to the solution. So one by one, the absence of trust. Okay, so it's funny. He's a better storyteller and better. I've actually watched a few YouTubes just to kind of refresh my memory, but he tells some good stories here. But he starts off with absence of trust, and he basically says, "Well, duh, we're taking our lunchtime to tell me that trust is important. That's the dumbest thing. Don't tell me you're going to tell me more than that." So this is a different type of trust. Team members that are unwilling to be vulnerable, notice that's in green, to one another, prevents you from building trust. And this is what Patrick Lencioni calls vulnerability-based trust. Okay, so it is not predictive trust, which is what everybody would think of. Okay, so try to go there. See how it got highlighted there? Vulnerability. That actually oval should be green, but I'm red green colorblind actually. Oh, good. I'm red green colorblind. But so vulnerability. Okay, predictive trust is when somebody's reliable, when they keep their word. When they keep their words, those are all good, right? When they're competent, certainly those are all good, right? When they commit to what they say they're going to do, right? You can trust them. That's predictive trust, which is important. But that's actually the low bar. Okay. When he talks about vulnerability-based trust, that's where you are vulnerable in the sense of you're not afraid to say what you're not good at. You're not afraid to say where you struggle. And when we get to the test, remind me to mention this again, is that that's a deep, deep level of trust. Okay. And there's a lot of teams that you've heard the safe environment and all that. I mean, which is a great thing to have, but it's easier to say than to do. Okay. I can speak my mind. I can do all this. Not if you get cut off and you get, that's a dumb idea, or, if somebody says that to you. And by the way, I won't call out names, but in a meeting literally a week ago, somebody mentioned something in one of our meetings. It was a big meeting, and the person made fun of that person. Now, they didn't mean any harm. They meant no harm by it. But do you think that person was harmed? A lot of those people he didn't know in that room. And that person was not going to offer any more ideas and wasn't going to, I can tell you that right now. But if you have predictive trust, you're going to operate and you're going to be okay. But high functioning teams will have vulnerability based trust. And it gets harder and harder as you get bigger and bigger teams. So when you go to the test, it's going to be relevant because it's almost irrelevant if you have a huge team. Because let's face it, Josh, you know me pretty well. I'm not saying we're there. I'd like to say we're there, but I have a chance of being there with vulnerability based trust, right? If you're in a group of even the office, okay, now I'm sure you like everybody in our office, right? But would you have that level? You'd be lying to me if you said yes.
No way.
Because it's a deep level that knows that you're my champion. And if I'm competing you for my next raise, or I'm competing for you for then I'm not going to have that trust. But if I know that Paul, you're my champion, and I know you're going to actually be rude to me when I need to be, when that's appropriate. And believe it or not, it can be. It can be. You can be rude to me. You can cut me off if I know you want what's best for me. If I know behind my back you're doing nothing but saying nice things about me, you're doing nothing but saying Jim needs to be in this position, then you can do all those things because I know and that is vulnerability-based trust. It's that deeper level of trust. And I'll tell you how you can get there. That's more on the solutions-based. Okay. I spend more time, and he tells a complete story just on this. Spend the most time on this because it's on the bottom. And you got to have this to have the other things. Okay. So those teams that don't have this, like I said, they can be productive, but they're going to look at the red. If you just look at the red words, avoiding, hesitate, withholding, not sharing. You don't even need to read. Do you even need to read the next words? Because that is basically what happens if you don't have that vulnerability-based trust. And the impacts are it limits collaboration. That doesn't mean you can't have any collaboration, but it limits it. Guarded interactions, that as that example I just showed you. I don't think that person is going to speak up in a meeting anymore. Like if you get, especially going back to the size of the team, Josh, let's just say we had that relationship, right? But then we're in a huge meeting and I do something like that. I've just lost all my emotional bank account because those people aren't in our team, right? So even though I might have been able to say that in a smaller team. So that's vulnerability-based trust. We'll come back to that when we talk about the solutions, okay? Okay, fear of conflict. Okay. If you don't have trust, you're not going to be able to have, you're going to have this fear of conflict. And this is the antithetical element that people think conflict is bad. Patrick Lencioni goes out of his way to say high functioning teams are full of conflict. That doesn't make any sense. He even talks about his marriage and how he had a friend that got divorced. They never argued, but he argues all the time with his wife. But you have to have that safety element, and we'll talk about it in the solutions. But this is what he talks about is productive conflict. Have you ever heard? Okay, I'll give you an example. If you have a fear of conflict and somebody says something you don't think is a good solution, if you don't have fear, you're going to tell them, I don't think that's a good idea. You got to have trust, vulnerability-based trust to do that. I don't think that's a good idea. And you're doing that out of love of that person. But if you have fear of conflict because that boss, that somebody just shoots you down or doesn't hear you or doesn't and said something, you're not gonna have any conflict. Okay. Have you ever been in a group meeting where you got to make a decision on a design? So you got on a pavement size or anything like that, and you're brainstorming around the table, and you should be nervous if everybody's quiet, because when you leave the room and 2-3 weeks later the design doesn't work out or something, well, it wasn't really my idea anyway. I saw problems with it all wrong. He gives the example of the train wreck. Basically, the people that are like that's a little passive aggressive is that people like that when they don't have that conflict, they're gonna have like the meeting after the meeting. Have you ever heard of that? The meeting after the meeting, and it happens all the time. I even see it after the time. We've had a meeting. Everybody's got their ideas out here. Everybody's given their ideas, right? All right, thanks. All right, we'll meet next week. Soon as you go outside, people start talking.
Yeah.
The meeting after the meeting. That is a clear sign that they didn't want to have conflict in that meeting. Okay. One of the results of that, if you see the red here, is avoiding engaging passionate debate It leads to what he calls as artificial harmony. And I'll talk about that in the upcoming when we talk about solutions. But artificial harmony is that when nobody says anything. Look at the behaviors. If you don't argue, you don't fight in your meetings, productive fighting, you're going to have suppressing, you're going to have nodding. Yeah, boss. Yeah, boss. Avoiding. And the impacts are, again, limits innovation because they don't want to. I've often said innovation starts with this crazy, stupid idea. And then you realize when you go into it, it's neither of those. It takes a little effort. So lacks innovation and it prevents clarity and alignment. So that's if you are not able to embrace that conflict. All right, number 3, lack of commitment. Well, if you don't have that conflict that we just mentioned, that begets commitment. They'll go along because they just walked out of the room. They'll go along because they nodded their heads, right? So they'll go along with it. But drilling down into that train wreck, so they clearly it wasn't their idea, right? So they walk out of there and they had the meeting after the meeting. They commit to, you think they committed to it. I did see a bunch of heads nodding, a bunch of heads were nodding. We are in agreement, right? But the lack of commitment is then when that train wreck happens and you find out, Josh, that the storm drain alignment, the Navy hates it. And we got to stay the weekend to redo it because we don't have it in our budget to redo it, right? The person that didn't go along with that crazy, that alignment of storm drain that you did was clearly wrong, Josh. See, I can do this. It's the train wreck. They're going to just see the train wreck and they're just going to grab some popcorn and they're just going to stand back and they're just going to watch this train crash. Because inside they know, what my idea would have. It would be a train wreck if they had my idea in there. We've all seen that. We've all seen that thing go wrong. And then somebody wasn't my idea. Yeah, push that, So if you don't have that argument, again, see how this builds, you don't have that true commitment. If you don't have that argument, they won't buy in. Okay. A lack of commitment. You can see the red. I am red being colorblind, but I think fail is in red. Commit. So they'll fail to commit to decisions. They'll commit passively. Indecisiveness, delay, the repeating and revisiting of decisions. I know I've seen that. And you can see it slows progress, creates confusion, and reduces confidence. All right, moving up. So if you don't have commitment, you're not going to have accountability because they didn't believe in your solution. So why would they want to go along with this and be accountable to a process or if you look at the behaviors here, is that if they're not committed to it, they're not going to call out people for missed deadlines. They're not going to follow a best practice they think is terrible. We've got a lot of best practices. I have asked for so much feedback on our best practices. And I've been doing this a long time. I don't get that much feedback. I do get some feedback. And I try to be as open as possible. But and I'll say it right now, we've got a lot of best practices. We've prioritized them. And there's actually some 4s on there. They're not very good. 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. Best practices. We prioritize these. If you think one sucks, please let me know. I don't own any of those. We developed them over a period of 4 or 5 years. It's not like we created them overnight. But if I don't hear from you, then you're not going to hold people up to following the best practice. You're going to allow standards to slip, reduces, encourages mediocrity. That one I like, mediocrity. And let's face it, mediocrity isn't the end of the world. But if we're mediocre, do you think we're going to win projects from firms that are better than that? That's our value proposition, is that we're not that. So without commitment, team members won't hold each other accountable. They'll stand back and they'll just let it go. Okay, and lastly, if you don't have people accountable to your decisions that you've made as a team, you're going to have inattention to results. People are gonna prioritize personal successes. I think that should be red. And status and ego should be red over the collective team. When we get into solutions, I'm gonna tell a funny story that he tells about Scottie Pippen. Okay. But you'll have, because you weren't committed, because you're not accountable, you're one-on-one. Yeah, you're looking for your raise, you're looking for your spot bonus, you're looking for your promotion. There's nothing wrong with wanting those, but if that's what your focus is, those should be a result of your team, of your successes, not your focus. I've said for 30 years, and people think that I'm a business development people outside this office. They think I'm a business development person. I'm an engineer. Okay, I do some business development, but I've told people for years, if you focus on making money, you'll make it for a short time, but you won't make it in the long run. Making money, that should not be your focus. Focus is doing great work, a great road design, a great airport. The money will come. Egos, status. If that's your focus, that's the inattention result. Look at focus on individual goals. And that's where the Pippen story comes up when we talk about solutions. It's a good one. Ignoring metrics, maybe by the team. You'll focus on your metrics. And resisting shared accountability. And it weakens the team, undermines. I don't even need to, it weakens, undermines. That's an important one right there, that last one. Is it creates silos and competition within the team. And I've seen this within different departments as well. I work quite a bit trying to bring departments together and break down silo walls. There'll always be some, but that's what that whole book he has on he has a whole book on silos. So that's inattention results. You're focusing on your goals and not what the team's goals are. So if you can see right here, you see right here, if you they build, you have an absence of trust, you're going to have fear of conflict. Fear of conflict leads to lack of commitment, which leads to avoidance accountability, and you're not going to have any the results you want. And I would even go so far as to say, if you focus on your own results, just like making money, you will get promoted, and you will, but it won't last. Those are short-lived. Okay, so now we'll just cover real briefly the evidence of it. Now I got to tell you, Richard Beck did something really interesting. I called him last night to try to see if he had the list. He didn't quite have the list, but he did something very gutsy. But the evidence is obviously of invulnerability. Vulnerability would be invulnerability. That would be that. Well, I know everything. You know, I don't need to. That false front, that false face, if you will. Even though it's impossible to be good at everything. Artificial harmony. Notice I italicized the word artificial. It's not harmony, it's artificial harmony. It's that the big evidence would be passive aggressive behavior. And these do line up. So fear, conflict, artificial. I did steal that screen capture. I don't give credit, so I'm probably breaking the law. But anybody can steal this from me. Lack of commitment. You have that ambiguity. If you don't have the accountability, you have low standards. And of course, you won't have attention to team results if you have status and ego, and that's the focus. Okay. So we're going to go through, that's the evidence of it. And what Richard Beck did, and I called him last night, is he actually showed some examples of evidence that was real evidence of where he has experienced in his career absence of trust, fear of conflict. Like he had like bullets. I'm not sure if he hit all of them, but at the beginning of the year, he started talking about this book and his department managers. And I thought that was, and I'm still thinking of doing that, but I don't think I'm vulnerable with this many people. I may share with people, and I will actually share a couple of vulnerabilities of mine when we get there. All right, so let's go through the evidence. What are the solutions? I'm going to go through the solutions one by one. As with anything, I mean, solutions are easier said than done sometimes, but okay. So the solutions, and I'll go through these, are, you notice on the handwritten or on the left side of that triangle. The solutions are contributions are captured. If you, for fear of conflict, the solution is you argue about the ideas. And I'll hit that. I'm going to hit each one of these one by one. But argue about the ideas. Remember that. Anybody that's read Getting to Yes about negotiating, that's right out of that. You focus on the ideas, not the person. Okay. Lack of commitment would be clear steps. Many of you know that I'm a big fan of, and not everybody is, of recording meetings because I keep copious notes. I've been doing it for 30 years. There's nobody who takes more notes than I do. I don't have to take as many notes now because Copilot can record and gives me what I love is action items. Because if we can talk in a meeting for an hour. If you don't have action items, then the meeting didn't do a whole lot. You talked a lot. Josh, thank you for sending me examples of meeting minutes because you had clear action items on those. So clear steps, assign responsibilities. Copilot actually puts your name on it. If you're in a meeting, if you're in this meeting right now, in fact, Paul, say you're going to do something right now. Just say anything. You're going to mow your lawn. Just say anything you're going to do.
Gonna do the dishes when I get home.
That's it. Now, he didn't even say his name, but Copilot will put that and put his name. And the reason I'm telling you that is it aligns, right? We have tools now that will do this. Instead of Jim, I can't even read my own handwriting half the time. But it'll say who said what. And then explicit and clear goals. All right, I'll go through these one by one. This with my finger. Okay. How do you overcome the absence of trust? Okay. Vulnerability-based trust, as I stated, is a high-level trust. So how do you get there? First of all, you're not going to get there overnight because it's such an emotional thing. You're not going to just tell somebody, right away that, trust me. This, by the way, this is a safe environment. Anybody can tell you that, is it? It may be. I'm not saying it isn't, but you got to live in that environment till you really know that's a safe environment. High-functioning teams know to be their best, they need to be a complementary team. The operative word that I just said in that sentence that I just said was there. To be their best, not to be my best. Not me, my, or I. So naturally, members have to be good and bad at certain things. I'm going to be better than certain. Josh, you're going to be better at me at some things. I'm going to be better than you at certain things. That's a complementary team. If I'm good at speaking, and I'm not saying I am, okay, I will go. That's my vulnerability. I'll tell you that later in the slide. And you're good at writing. There's part of me that doesn't want you to be good at speaking. If you want to, that's fine. But we could be an ham and egg team. If you golf, you know that reference. I do the writing, you do the writing, I do the speaking. So to encourage vulnerability, you have to admit what you're not good at. But you can only do that if you have this vulnerability-based trust. I know that you want what's best for me, and Cleet, I know that, and so if you give me advice, first of all, advice isn't taken very well when it's asked. You got no chance if it's not asked. But in a working environment, if you're a supervisor, it is your job to give advice, whether it's asked or not. If you're a parent, it is your job to tell your kid not to run in the street. He didn't ask, whether or not he's 5 years old, should I run in the street? Right? So advice isn't well taken when it's asked. It's even worse if it's not asked, but we're in an environment where you got to give it when it's not asked. Okay? But you have to have, they have to believe the person that's giving them, my son knows I'm trying to save his life. And hopefully I've given him that trust. He knows I'm his dad and I would do anything for him. If you think your boss is just looking out for his raise, you think you're going to listen to him and take his advice? No. If your boss says he's good at everything, which is impossible, how are you not going to be able to say I'm good at everything? You'd feel, oh my gosh, he's good at everything. I can't show my weakness. So the solution is the boss goes first. If you want to encourage vulnerability, you have to show vulnerability. Okay? If you want to encourage vulnerability, you have to show vulnerability, and you have to go first. And I'll go through a couple right now. And I've done this presentation before, and I was like, I don't know all of you, so I'm not gonna show you my real vulnerabilities, just my shallow ones. There's a couple. I have ADHD. I'm not gonna blame everything on that, but I always feel comfortable presenting. Hopefully that comes off. But I speak too fast. I don't pause enough. I hate listening to my presentations. Okay, I'm trying to slow down today a little bit. I had a plan on that last presentation on best practices. I had a plan. I was going to record that so that we would play it for new hires. So we didn't have to, so if they missed it, they could just listen to an audio that's 40 minutes long and know our best practices, because there's a lot to take in. I'm not doing that. The recording was horrible. I'm so kind of insecure about the way that it sounded. It was terrible. Hopefully I'm slowing down in this one, but that's a weakness of mine. And Carly, I went up to Carly after a day or two afterwards, and I asked her, I told her my concerns and all this. I asked her opinion, and it just shows you that Carly is truly a better person than I am, because she just clearly lied to me. And she told me it was great, or she told me it was good. She didn't say it was great, but she said basically it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So thanks, Carly, for fibbing a little bit there and to save my feelings. We'll talk about that a little bit later, though. The other weakness I have, and I actually expressed this one at Ron Hughes' retirement party. By the way, when you're sincere in telling the truth, like John Wooden says, tell the truth and you don't need to remember a story. These are sincere. So this just came up at Ron Hughes weeks ago.
No, this is about a month ago.
Or a month ago. I told a short story that I am not good at rough grading. I'm actually very good at fine grading. I'm going to say a name that somebody's just like me, but this is for me to confess my vulnerabilities. But I just can't. I can't start and see contours. I'm just not very good at it. I can blame it on things, but fine grading, I'm very good at. Right. So for years, when we had a ball field, we had something like this. I would always go to Ron. First of all, I gave it a shot. And then after I wasted about 8 hours of trying to rough grade, I'd give it to Ron. And in 2 hours, he gave me the whole ball field graded. And then I could take it. That's a complimentary team. To be honest with you, I don't know this. I think I'm better fine grader than he is. But when you hire new grads, they don't know what they're good or bad at, and they're going to be very cautious to tell you what they're struggling with. I struggled on earthworks, mainly because I think I was colorblind. I couldn't see red, green pencils. We did it in pencils back then. But I can make excuses. I wasn't very good at it. But the boss goes first. Okay, so if you want your members to show and be honest when they struggle to do something, you got to show them where you struggle. Okay. All right, fear of conflict. So how do you avoid that meeting after the meeting? Well, how do you avoid that artificial harmony? Or how about groupthink? That nodding of the heads. Going along. Yeah, that's right, boss. He tells, I can't tell a story in time, but he tells I'll just tell you the basis of the story is he has one of the CEOs, and he says it's a very high profile CEO. It doesn't say the name, but he says he had a 360, he hired a firm, actually hired Patrick Lencioni, the Table Group, to do feedback on him. And the feedback was, you don't listen enough, it doesn't matter what it was. And so Patrick Lencioni went, and it was anonymous, went back, here's your feedback. He goes, oh, really? So he calls everybody in. He goes, says here that, I'm not good at listening, and oh yeah, sure you are, boss. Sure, yeah, boss, So how do you avoid not getting that, how do you avoid that? Well, you have to normalize healthy debate. Okay, but you're going to have that healthy debate. You're going to only have somebody disagree with you if they're doing it because they really want the right solution. They want the right pavement section. We think you're crazy. It needs to be thicker, Cleat. There's no way, these planes, it needs to be a thicker pavement. I'm not going to tell him that if I don't feel secure, if I don't feel, and I know that he has more experience than I do in this. He's certainly more qualified than I am. And I mean that sincerely as far as pavement sections. So who am I to tell him that I think? Well, guess what? I may be wrong, but I still should express my opinion. And I can only do that if I know that, that I know that he won't attack me, neuter me, and he can only take it if he knows I'm trying to disagree because I really think it's wrong. Okay, and sort of normalize it. Honestly, I would go so far as to say you should almost argue in every meeting. Try to keep, set the ground rules. You can't go on forever. High-performing teams know that productive conflict will find that innovative idea that sounded stupid when it came out of the box. There's a phrase that Stephen Covey used in his book, and he tells a story too. When somebody disagreed with him, he literally responded, and I have embraced this. I really, truly believe I have. Is he said, when somebody disagreed with him, he said, "Good, you see it differently." And I think he was sincere. He was not being sarcastic. And I'll tell a short story here that happened to me years and years ago. It was about cell phones. And it was about so far back as cell phones. I think it was when they still had an antenna. That's how long ago this was. But I was looking to get a new cell phone. And a guy that worked for me, John Trent's worked for me. And he said, no, that's not the right phone to get. And I was John's champion. I truly was. I wanted what was best for him. And I literally used that phrase. I said, "Good, you see it differently." And I meant it. I wanted him to prove me wrong, even though I'd done my research on this phone, by the way. I had some interest in it, some skin in the game. But I honestly wanted him to prove me wrong for two reasons. Because I did want the best phone. And you know what? I wanted him to be successful. It didn't mean I wasn't successful. This idea of being right is one of the most overplayed cards. You don't need to be right. I do not need to be right. So we did have a tiebreaker. Brian Weiss, we went actually to lunch at our place, went to lunch, and it was fun. We gave our arguments just like in court. And Brian was the judge. And actually, I won the debate. Believe it or not, going into that, I didn't think I was going to win the debate. John knew more about phones than I did, but I actually won the debate. So what's the solution? Insist on conflict. If you get nothing but nodding heads, don't stop there. Make conflict fun. You got to have that. Everything else I just talked about, vulnerability, trust. You just can't all of a sudden start with this one. You cannot start with this, okay? You've got to have those other foundational dysfunctions figured out, because it won't be fun if you don't have that. But it can be fun. What time is it?
12:42.
All right. So, all right. The conflict, fear of conflict, the solutions. Is the solutions in green? It's supposed to be.
It is.
All right, good. All right. So lack of commitment to those solutions. Okay, so how do you avoid that train wreck? Okay, remember the train. So how do you avoid the train wreck? Or maybe, just maybe, you get those people that are waiting for your train wreck, get them to maybe switch the track. Just switch it over so the trains don't wreck. Because if they don't feel heard, everything we talked about, they're just going to enjoy and grab the popcorn, right? So how do you get those people to not have the meeting after the meeting? How do you get them to not be passive aggressive? How do you get them to root on for the cause? Well, it's about clarifying the goals and ensure everybody is heard. So it's what he talks about commitment and buy-in. So when team members, he uses the phrase, when team members do not weigh in, they're not going to buy in. So if you have that conflict and they feel that they're heard, he says 99%. I don't know if his dad even has background. He says if people do feel heard, their conflict happened, but the team made a different decision. I mean, because that happens, right? But you won't have the passive if they feel that they were heard. And I think John, in that one scenario earlier, I think when he heard Brian Weiss when we made the argument, I don't think he dug down on the phone that he had. I think he probably said, you know what, you're maybe right. So that is the solution. You've got to have that conflict. You got to have people have heard. They got to at least know, even if it wasn't their decision. He uses, like I said, the 99. He says 99% of the people will go along with the goal. And like I said, it sounded like he just said, I don't know if he has a stat behind that. But the point is if they're heard, they'll go along even if it's not their decision. Now, he says something that is actually not a lot of people, it'll sound crazy. He says, consensus is not needed. See, that's a fallacy. People think when you leave a room, you need consensus. You don't need consensus. You don't want consensus. You want the argument. He literally says, I wrote it down here, is consensus is not only necessary, he considers it a 4-letter word. Because consensus is next in kin to groupthink. People go along. You have to be able to say you're not going to have consensus, but you know what? Let's go that direction because you heard my direction. We're going that way. Okay. So
but I didn't see the email till late.
people will commit. There's somebody needs to mute.
So I ordered for him.
Is that Stacy? It sounds like it's coming over there. Anyway, so he says that people will commit even if the solution is not theirs, as long as they've been heard. Okay, so disagree. He mentions the firm that came up with this, but disagree. That's the conflict, and then commit. And they will commit if they feel that they've been heard. All right, 2 more here. Solutions. Avoidance of accountability. All right, so if you have that commitment, then people will feel this need for accountability. So you see up there the shared standards and the peer-to-peer feedback. I kind of rephrase that. That's what he says. I kind of rephrase this a little bit as shared standards are like shared best practices, shared goals, shared culture, which we've been talking about the last 3 months, right? I had AI create our culture statement and I have some feedback on it. I've gotten feedback from about 10 people. Thanks, Paul. You gave some feedback. But if they don't believe in those best practices, if they don't believe in that culture statement, they're not going to feel that they should be accountable for it. And the worst thing is the next thing, peer-to-peer feedback, they're not going to have other people be accountable to it because they didn't believe in it anyway. If they didn't believe that we should, best practices that we should, it's not really that important to bring an agenda to a meeting. Some people may think that. Then when your colleague or somebody comes to a meeting without an agenda prepared, they're not going to say, hey, where's the agenda? You really should have an agenda this meeting. They're not going to, because they don't really believe in it anyway. So if you don't, that's the commitment we just talked about. So the solution to this is the peer-to-peer. It says feedback. I say peer-to-peer. I rephrase that as peer-to-peer accountability. Is if you see somebody not doing a best practice, you should call them out on it. Because if you don't, please tell me and we'll remove that best practice. But you know what I'll ask you though? I'll ask you why. Why? And I'll go exactly what I just talked about. We'll have an argument. We'll have a conflict. And I got to tell you, Josh, if you come to me and I'm gonna want you to win in a sense. If I'm secure in my job and my relationship, because I know you would only come to me and tell me a best practice sucks if it sucks. And I used to go to Debbie Bright for years when we did these processes. I used to say, Debbie, if we're not using a process, it's because of one of 2 reasons. The process sucks, and yes, I use that word. The process sucks, or we just didn't give it a chance. It's one of those 2 reasons. And Debbie, I need you to tell me if you don't think the process is a process we developed is good. Okay. But if we have these best practices, if we have these goals, and you don't believe in one of them, why would you ever hold somebody accountable? And the key is that it cannot be in a high functioning teams, it cannot be the boss that does it. High performing teams hold each other accountable. And I wanted to italicize each other, but the whole line is italicized. Maybe I should underline it. You hold, oh, I did underline it. It doesn't show up here. You hold each other accountable. Because it can't be the job of the boss. And this is actually another one of my vulnerabilities. And actually, Patrick Lencioni tells a story about being a parent, and I totally related to him on this. This is one of my weaknesses. 100% holding people accountable. I mean, and when he talks about it being his, I was just like, I was with him, brothers in arms. I mean, and because I want to be liked. I don't want people mad at me. You know, I mean, there's insecurities there. Okay. I don't hold, and I was not a good parent on this. My wife was way better. Bedtime was this bedtime. I was terrible. I mean, I didn't hold my kids accountable. They want 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes. I'd say yes every time. And then it just got worse. They abused me. My kids abused me because I gave in. So you have to hold people accountable, but it's got to be a team effort. It cannot be one person. So I can get better at it, but I got to see other people, you know, in the environment. So, so that's the solution is accountability is if you have the commitment, the other things we've talked about is you got to hold each other accountable. And if you're holding each other accountable, you can have results. Okay. So the inattention results, what is the solution to that? And here's the Scottie Pippen story. And it's a pretty funny one. I don't really remember this, but I totally believe it is that, okay. So, you know, the difference between groups, I'm very careful. By the way, that second team on the side, we said group. No, I changed it to team because groups are different than teams. I want to be very clear on this because it's related to inattention results. Is working groups are similar to, I'll give you a couple examples, similar to, or he uses the example of a golf team, which really isn't a team. A golf team is a golf group because even when you're for your high school, you're all getting your individual scores. You add them up and you're a team in the end, but not really. I mean, you're doing your own thing. That's not a problem, but that's not a team. Okay. And that's not a problem. Groups are okay, but it's going to come into play here when I say inattention results because teams are different. I initially used to call our Mountain West Fed group on Fridays, Josh. I used to call that the Mountain West Fed team. That's not a team. Josh, that is not a team on Friday. That doesn't mean we're not effective. That's a group because we're all trying to do certain things and we're all trying to figure you, Josh, you take this one, you take this one. Yeah, that's a group. Okay. But if we ever say, hey, Josh, you're going to be the lead on that and Jim's going to help you, we become a team to that task. So that's interesting, working groups and teams. And I guarantee, and so he tells a story about Scottie Pippen. Most of you know Michael Jordan, when he retired, he was the star of the team. There was no doubt. And he was one of the best players in basketball. I mean, the only fact that people didn't know is because Jordan was there. When Jordan retired for that short time, he was the whole team. And it was deserved so. He was clearly the best player. So he tells a story about when Phil Jackson, it was the playoff game against the hated Knicks. And they got a last second shot. And Pippen says, you know, obviously I'm taking the shot. And Phil Jackson says, no, not because they're not really paying attention to Tony Kukoc. He'll have an open shot. You won't. You'll have 3 people on you. And that's actually our gameplay. No, I'm the best player. I'm going to take the shot. And Phil Jackson sat him. The entire announcers, I kind of do it. The announcers saying, is he hurt? Did he twist his ankle or something? Why is he out? This is the last second shot. Why is Pippen out? There was a bunch of talk, and that was Scottie Pippen looking out for himself, looking like he was the best shot. He was not going to go along with the team. What was the goal of the team? Was to win the game. The goal of the team was not to have any individual score a basket, not to even Tony Kukoc. So that's the example because of inattention results. Because if you look, because the culprit of inattention results is ego. We mentioned on that first slide we'll talk about is ego and individual wants. Okay, and he says, you know, that he wishes that every team had a Scottie Pippen because then you know who to fire. That's what he says. But when you think about it, because that doesn't happen in our business. That happened there, but in our business, what happens? Those people that want the raise, they just kind of go along, and they're not as obtuse as Scottie Pippen is. They're not as rude. You know what I mean? They'll be passive aggressive. And so rarely would you see anybody have that attitude in our businesses, because you would get rid of them, right? So the solution is that you're not a group, you're a team, and that's what goes to the size that we'll talk about. Is you can't have just a size of 100 people, and you celebrate the wins together. So individuals win only when the team wins. And there's an example of when you're a quarterback, and I've seen this when you're a quarterback, and you've seen receivers that want the ball every time. The goal is to win is to score the touchdown for the team. The goal is not so that you catch a touchdown in the end zone. That may be the means and methods, but that is the solution. But you got to have everything else in order to get this. You'll never get this. You can't start with this. Okay, so we're wrapping things up here. So this is Michael Baker. See, I got a logo right there. So how do you practicing the solutions? So I used AI to try to create this. I tried to get that pyramid on the triangle on the right. I tried to get it centered, and it wouldn't do it for me. But you see the solutions right there: building the trust, engage, embrace the conflict, ensure commitment. So that's how you mitigate these. So look what I did here. Best practicing. You see, I actually see the center column right there. Just for fun, I populated that. I'm not going to give it to anybody, but I populated our best practices. When our best practice was, the birth of that was trying to be the best team we could be, high functioning team. So I aligned ones, and there's an important word that those best practices are to hopefully mitigate any of those dysfunctions right there. Okay. And our culture removes the dis from dysfunction, if we believe in it. If you don't believe in it, and by the way, I'm going to have that culture statement at our party for everybody to sign. I'm not going to police everybody signing it, but I'm going to get all the feedback. And by the way, I want to be very clear. The feedback is a form of conflict, right? I never made a promise that I'm going to do the things that you told me to do on that culture statement. But I will tell you this right now. I'm going to absolutely take it into consideration. I'm going to review it with Scott and other people. And it's going to take some time. I'm going to go to each person and say, this is what we did. Yeah. And if I do that, in fairness to them, they should buy into our culture. So here's where we're wrapping things up. Here's where it gets real, the test. So here is the test he has in his book. Okay. The cool thing about this test is that you answer those 1, 2, or 3. And I was going to eventually, is the cool thing is you just answer it as quick as you can, 1, 2, or 3, where you think you are. 1, 2, or 3. 3 is usually, 2 is sometimes, 3, 1 is rarely. And then it populates these. You notice how they're not in order? Statement 4, 6, and 12. So you don't know which one is relating to. And then you get your score. Okay. And guess what? 15 years ago, I did this. And that was my score. And I'm being vulnerable right now because those aren't very good scores. But if you look at the 3 to 5, you got some work to do. So I did this, and this was a accumulation of scores. I had Debbie Bright collect the scores. I didn't know who said what on it. Went to everybody. I did this right after. You guys don't know the history of our departments, but we were one department. We were 2 departments before the recession, Land Development, Public Works. When we brought them together, I was the head of that, and Trudy was the head of one, and the Public Works, who was the head of that one? Anyway, I was the head of both of them. And that's when I gave this test. So there's a lot of people in that group that didn't really know me very well. But I did that test. But this didn't tell me that I failed. This told me, you know what, Jim, you got to work on that 4. You got to work on that absence of trust. And I started doing best practice and figuring out how ways I could do that. Okay, so on a side note, I'm wrapping this with a side note. I went and I tried to search for a test that you guys can have. I'm still working on that, and I'm going to try to get one that you guys can do. Oh, going back to the team of size, it makes no sense to give this to the office because you trust the people you don't even know in another department. You have to take it for your own departments, right? Because how would you know if who's in water that Oscar or somebody, you could have vulnerability-based trust unless you work with it. Do you work with Oscar much? Exactly. So you can't. So I'm going to offer to the department managers to see where we can focus. And this is wrapping up. So Patrick Lencioni just says, when there's trust, conflict becomes nothing but the pursuit of truth and attempt to find the best possible answer or solution or direction or pavement design or storm drain alignment. Okay, so we talked about overview of all of them. I spent most of the time on that trust, went through briefly the evidence, some of the solutions for each of them, and what the test was. And that's it. So, all right, so my goal, if anybody, if I sold this book to you verbally, not literally, objectively, if you guys are interested in this book, it is The Fable is a Good Story. I have 10 books here that you can take one, and I'll get more if there's that interest. All right. So is there any questions? And then we'll wrap this up. What time? I'm out of time.
Right on time.
Right on time.
You nailed it. So
So,
thanks,
there
Joe.
you go.
So we have a few minutes for questions if anybody has time to go over. And that was
and
excellent.
if you
I
don't,
really appreciate
that's
it.
fine too. Yeah. Go ahead. Come on, hit me. You want another vulnerability of mine, right?
Yeah.
You stop the recording. Yeah, just go in there, stop the recording. All right, there's a lot of other things I'm not very good at if you want to stay after class. You can see my stuff. These are pictures.